Hi, everyone. Welcome to the SoDA Series Live. Thanks for joining us today. I am Tom Beck, and I am Executive Director of SoDA. And my partner in crime, Kristen Bell, is running a few minutes late today, so she left me all alone to do the intro, taking the training wheels off today, so that's exciting. The SoDA Series Live is a collaboration between SoDA and the Adobe XD team. Every month we talk to design leaders in the digital design space about their businesses, design trends, their teams, the culture, their companies, their clients, and just general issues and opportunities in the industry. So we're thrilled to have you here today. SoDA, for those of you who don't know, SoDA acronym stands for the Society of Digital Agencies, but we're a community of digital agency founders and owners. We've got about 100 members across 20 countries, and we exist to help our members become more connected, smarter about running their businesses, and give them access to the ideas and the resources they need to continue to create great digital design studios. So thanks again for joining us today. First, I want to introduce Talon Wadsworth. Talon is a principal designer at Adobe on the XD team, and he'll be leading the conversation today. So welcome, Talon. It's great to see you. Oh wait, you're still on mute, my friend.
Yes, I'm still on mute. Thanks for that, Tom. We're still all those things always still happen. No, Tom, always a pleasure to be here. Again, there's no better way for me to spend my afternoon than talking to these amazing design leaders from the SoDA agencies. So yeah, always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for doing this with us, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And our guests today are from Free Association. Free Association is a design studio based in Brooklyn. But they focus specifically on digital products and brand systems. And we're fortunate enough today to have Andy Titus and Brendan Truscott from Free Association. Andy is a managing partner at Free Association, and Brendan is a senior product director. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey there. Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So before I turn it over to Talon and we get started, just a couple quick housekeeping items. I'm going to drop off video, but I will be interacting within LinkedIn and monitoring the conversation and comments there. So if you have questions during the discussion, just post them or go ahead and message me, and we'll make sure we save maybe 10 minutes or so at the end of the conversation to pose those questions. So again, thanks for joining us. It's going to be a great conversation today. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Talon, Andy, and Brendan. Have a great conversation today, guys.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, Bren, Andy, so lovely to see you. I'm really excited that we're doing this. Full disclosure, I've been talking to these guys a lot. I've been really fascinated by the team there and the projects they've been working on and their processes. So again, this is really like a chance for us to just have a bigger audience in one of our regular conversations. So I'm really happy to sort of be here talking with you both. So thanks for joining us. Yeah,
great to be here. Thanks, Talon.
Yeah. All right, so let's set the stage. And I'm the insider. Well, I feel a little bit like an insider now with Free Association, from our conversations in the past. But let's give everybody else kind of a little bit of background, a little bit of history about Free Association. Andy, why don't you kind of kick us off here? Tell us a little bit about Free Association, the team, and kind of what you do, and your role, and then how that's evolved, over the years. I sort of start us there.
Yeah. So I think Tom mentioned, we're a design agency with really two major areas of focus. There's the digital product side, and then our work in brand systems. And on the digital product side, we're talking about research, UX, design systems, getting into actually creating full digital product experiences. And on the brand systems side, for us, that's a bit more expansive than just working on digital product design systems. It does include that, and that's where a lot of our work in that realm kind of comes from, is that's a parallel track in any kind of UX work we do as well. But we see it as, component libraries, but also the platforms that house those component libraries, the standards that surround them, the tools that we build to help explain those standards or help make sure people get them right. And then through that work, we've also been invited in to work on some core brand pieces as well, which I think we'll get into eventually. I know that's a topic to dive much deeper on, so I'll pause there. But that's our overall area of focus. We're made up of really 3 disciplines: strategy and management, product design, UX engineering. We're based in Brooklyn, though we've kind of grown up between Brooklyn and the Bay Area as a team, and in the last couple of years have been leaning into remote and hiring in other states. We're in like 8 or 9 states right now with employees. And I think on the side of our work, we've been fortunate to line up some partnerships with some really leading, well-known brands, but also really aim to keep a mix of earlier stage companies in our world as well, just to allow us to flex different muscles, work between the really mature business and the one just kind of getting off the ground.
Nice.
My role is managing partner. I come from a UX and design background. I've started as a designer and was in the work for many years before I started leading teams, and now am actually still in the work to a degree, but am shifting a bit more towards a focus on attracting talent, attracting our clients, and running the product that is our agency with a peer of mine, Eric Konzelman, who's another managing partner.
Nice. That's gotta be quite a transition, right? Like that's one of those phases that like a lot of designers find themselves at, like doing less of the on the ground work and then doing the work of bringing in more work, and the talent. And like you said, so how's that sitting with you? How's that transition going?
It's sitting well for me at this point, because it's been some time, since that transition. I think my last time truly in a designer role we're looking at a decade plus at this point.
So, all right. So you're even at this point.
Yeah. So I've settled in.
Yeah. Bryn, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your role on the team at Free Association?
For sure. Thanks, Talon. Yeah, so I'm a senior product director, and so our product directors fall under the strategy and management discipline, which Andy described, one of our 3 disciplines. We really play the role of kind of strategy leads. Strategy is a through line across all of our disciplines, so it's not as though product directors are the only ones kind of in that vein, but we're probably flexing the hardest on strategy and just kind of cross-disciplinary team coordination. And so it's a fairly new-ish role, right, Andy? It's been around for a few years, and it's been really cool. I was involved at the company beforehand, kind of leading our UX research practice. So it was a nice transition for me, but it's great. It's a little bit more just about our team composition. Usually it's represents the entirety of our discipline. So usually it's always at least a product director, design, engineering, UX engineering's more often than not represented as well. So it's a fun role in that there's always kind of working between those 3 disciplines, and so there's kind of you're always sort of becoming a little bit more fluent in everyone else's language, which. I come from a strategy and consulting world before I came into UX research. So that's kind of my sweet spot. I kind of love dancing between everyone else's more specialized realms.
Yeah. And you're sort of designing the design process, which I think is almost equally as fascinating as, putting the pixels down themselves.
Yep.
Awesome. So one thing I want to sort of get out there, because I think this is something that it really stuck out to me in all of our previous conversations, and I think really distinguishes kind of your approach from, say, some other agencies, which is this really this big focus on building lasting partnerships with clients, which I think is a really great, because again, this is I've had experience working with agencies in my time at Adobe, and it's always hard to bring someone else external in to execute on a problem that requires a lot of sort of baseline knowledge, right? So executing very well on those projects often takes like a bigger or deeper engagement. So that's something that really resonated with me in all of our conversations. It's just your approach. You want to tell us a little about the sort of genesis of that approach of building these lasting partnerships with clients, and kind of how that works and how that benefits you and your team?
Yeah.
Andy or Brandon, either one of you, which one wants to?
Yeah, I can jump in first there. I think a lot of us have had the experience of being on a true product team where you're dedicated to something for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
We come from a mixed background overall, people who've been like fully in-house, some who have been dominantly on the agency side, and with agencies even who have focused on shorter term engagements. But many of us have had that experience where we get to go deep on a project and be dedicated to it for a time, especially in the product world, and have found that to be really rewarding and sort of, you can connect it to the way that the world's best digital products are run, in that they're not looking at their day-to-day like a series of projects. They're looking at it as, we've got a team who's becoming fully expert in this business, in this brand, in the customers. They're not juggling multiple things. They're really focused in typically even on like an area of the product, not even a team that's working on the full picture. And that really attracted us. We've kind of decided, I think it's been at least 5 years since we made more of a decision to kind of double down and go after more of that kind of work. And with that, there's a decision of like, we need to set a pillar that account longevity is sort of the goal that leads that leads all other goals. If we can't build partnerships that last long enough, then we can't get in there in the way that we want and become experts and deliver the kind of value we want time and time again as we build on learnings. We don't want to get into work that feels too much like, here's the brief, come back in a couple of weeks with the final product and then see you later. We want to be there to run the next round of research and learning against the thing we built and build on it and become more and more knowledgeable as we go.
Yeah. So, there's something in there about not only in like, being a strong UX designer is really having a foundational understanding of the user, but there's something in there you're saying is also like the problem is having kind of a baseline understanding of the teams involved, right? Like all UX projects, all product or service projects require a lot of people to go and execute, and doing that successfully requires getting a lot of people on board. And so, Brandon, I want to talk about that. Talk about your engagement with those teams, because again, to me, it feels not just about the user and the problem space, but also about how you solve those process, issues, that you face in collaborating with a lot of diverse people, working on an internal team like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, kind of another way to build on Andy's point, right, is that, being involved with these design orgs, for a long period of time allows us to build that institutional knowledge, like you're saying, Talon's understanding kind of how and in which ways we can operate internally and what's worked in the past and what we found, and really understanding the moving parts of the product in the business and then the teams, obviously, right? And sort of how every org's different. And I think just because we take this sort of long-term view doesn't mean we don't operate in a very short-term kind of way, right? So we're very much thinking, and we're very often tasked with really mission-critical near-term problems, right? And actually, when you think about why it makes sense to have a long-term partner, is that, we can dial in really, really quickly without sort of losing too much time getting up to speed. We know the players, we already probably know many of them, personally, and understand sort of where they're coming from. And, we match talent with the challenge at hand, but because we've been involved for so long with most of our partners, there's multiple designers, product directors, engineers that have that institutional knowledge. So we can even keep the team very, very purposefully, matched for the challenge without really losing much institutional knowledge. So, when it comes down to being able to execute quickly on something, really mission critical, that's when, having an understanding of roadmaps. We spend a lot of time learning roadmaps in these orgs. So we know what other teams are working on, what's coming up, right? We know kind of where things are at in different ways. So understanding the roadmaps, having sort of, chats all the time with leaders in different camps or pods, right? That's kind of a common org strategy now. So staying in tune with folks we have worked with, maybe are not working with currently, is kind of gives us that, I think, holistic view that, we can situate ourselves very quickly around a problem. I think that's kind of what allows us to collaborate really effectively. To answer your question, how do we get that process going? It's kind of, we know right where that challenge sits in the larger picture. And we can, get rocking right away. And
I mean, design anymore, particularly with the complex problems that we're solving for, is really a people problem, right? Designing and thinking about like people's problems, and then trying to find creative solutions to do that. And it definitely seems like this arrangement helps you kind of hit the ground running much faster. You built up the knowledge not only of the space but of the people involved, and that helps smooth all communications and all path toward that final production.
Yeah, totally.
So, how do you structure a team then to sort of support this type of model? Like, what's the team makeup, and then what is kind of the day to day once you kind of get up and going with the team? I thought that was really interesting from one of our last conversations.
Yeah, the structure, there are some constants and then a whole lot of variables. I guess for us, some of the constants we aim for are that we always have a product director who's the cross-functional team lead, who, as Bren kind of outlined, it's really, they're the main point of contact with the client, or main stakeholder on the partner side. They own strategy, co-own really, but the buck stops with the product director. They are the team lead. They need to make sure that the decisions the team is making are really on point with the outcomes that we set in the beginning of engagement. And paired with a product director, we always have a design director. And then from there, variables come in. I think the most common, third would be additional design or the addition of UX engineering to a team. And most of our teams are 3 to 4 people to start, and typically skew senior to start. And then as we form a relationship, that there's definitely room for less senior talent as well to kind of build up knowledge and contribute as we go. But yeah, we typically start small and senior and dedicated. I think that's the key aspect, is that designers especially, there's no wiggle room for us in them being on multiple projects. They will be fully dedicated to that product team. With product directors, there's possibility, dependent on really the team makeup of a few partnerships, like maybe they could split into 2, but that's the most that we'd ever split any given resource in the work. The vast majority of the time, everybody's 100% dedicated. And then the exact makeup is all about how can we best plug into an internal org. What often we're positioning as a single team with our partners, meaning we're just, they may already have, a designer, a PM, a researcher, an analyst, and they need to add lots of velocity and outside perspective. So they want to plug us in. We want to not be the free association team on top of the partner team. We want to be referred to by first name, so that it doesn't create that feeling of you're passing it over the wall to the agency, but more like we just bulked up our team, immediately, and now we can hit the ground running. So yeah, Brent, I don't know if you had any other thoughts to add towards Talon's question there, but that's my first take.
Yeah, around team structure, you're saying?
Yeah, just you can talk about the benefits both for your team and for the client, right? As you're talking about the strategy here, there is this benefit of having this deep well of knowledge and this collaborative sort of commitment, to these teams, and how does it pay off for them? What is the I think we've talked about it here and there, but maybe just put it together for us in a more cohesive way. What is the benefit of these deeper engagement models?
I think one thing that we see a lot, just kind of talking to customers, understanding, how we're showing up, bringing value is, we are kind of experts in, really supercharging that internal process, right? To Andy's point, it's not a throw it over the fence. They're the experts. They're just going to give us something. We implement it. That's not the model we go for. The model we go for is we understand we need to collaborate really deeply with the client, right? We have subject matter domain expertise, but we don't understand. We need to understand the internal picture and really what are the jobs to be done, especially with systems and things, right? There's notion that all design systems are the same couldn't be further from the truth, right? So we have to understand it. So we need that deep collaboration. And what oftentimes that client is really looking for is that really, really clear strategic focus and rigor. So we're experts in shaping up that process. It's not about us coming in and telling folks what to do, right? It's about saying, we know we're going to kind of de-risk this really, really important initiative that we can't get wrong, so to speak. We want to make sure that, we're leveraging our internal resources absolute max, make sure we're getting the most out of that knowledge we have internally. And then we're throwing some expertise and some firepower on top of it. So I think that the collaboration is the benefit, right? It's not just about hiring expertise. It's not just about bodies, right? It's not just a resource problem, right? We can't do our work if that's the only problem, right? We need that collaboration and that focus. And I think that's the benefit. And that's I think when the relationship's working, it's when we're finding that, really, really deep focus. Internal teams, they're often on across a lot of things, right? So that's really tough, I think. Obviously different org models are trying to break that down in some ways, but again, I think there's a ton of instances in which bringing in a team like ours just adds that focus. And maybe one other point on the structure piece is just the fact that to Annie's point, we're typically senior and small, and design and engineering, I'll just kind of highlight that it's one discipline sort of to us. It's design, right? Our kind of designers are very fluent in front end. Our front end developers are kind of designers too, right? So I think there's a mind meld there that we so value. And because we're bringing in a UX engineer, that's oftentimes even sometimes the design director, right? That happens. We have folks that can flex both ways. There's never that issue of when to bring in engineering. And I think you see it in the work we do. I think that the technical strategy piece is always there. And a lot of our product directors are technical too, or come from a technical kind of background. So that's just another thing to highlight, that I think is pretty differentiated, in that we kind of it's design, So whether you're coming out from an engineering or a kind of technical side, it doesn't make a difference. We have to worry about both to make excellent products. We have to worry about the environment in which they're built, the browser or the mobile OS, whatever it is. And we also have to worry about, the intent and the strategy behind the design. So to us, it's the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, and because the goal, right, of any digital design effort is about the end state. What is this going to be? It's going to be implemented by an engineer or a developer in some way. And designers, I think this has been a big topic and a big part of the trend of, design systems really rising to the top, is really accelerating that, ensuring that the thing that I'm designing can be implemented accurately, and it can be then accelerated, and we can, design to development, even faster to ensure this, to support these kind of more agile structures that a lot of internal teams are taking, in their development cycles.
Yep. 100%.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's a little bit of a different take, right? That's what's kind of, I think really fascinating about this is that, agents, that's not really how agencies have worked, or even server-side design. It's been, we execute on the brief, and we work with a lot of different clients. We have a very diverse set of portfolios, but you only really ever get to go kind of so deep, right? And so this is kind of a switch of that, a flip of that model, which is now you're going to sort of curate a set of really dedicated clients. You're going to get in there and have a focus and build up expertise and go really deep on these problem sets. I mean, I think that's really, to me, what sets free association apart. So I really love sort of your perspectives on that. And this is I remember making the transition myself from that external world, agency side, to internal. I was kind of missing that diversity for a while, but then just the complex and fascinating nature of the problems that these these products and services are solving, kind of made up for that, right? There's this real, sort of you can really sink your teeth into a problem, and at the end of the day, you can feel really proud because you see your thing out there in the world and the impact that it's having. And it's a different mindset, right, than what we sort of traditionally would approach as an agency or an external design studio.
Yeah. Very much one of our goals is to try to build something that for us is the best of those two worlds of being in-house and in on big strategic calls and plugged into the way that the org works. There are great benefits of being on an in-house team, and I've had that experience where I went deep with a few career chapters there. And, in contrast to that, you have the agency world where traditionally, I guess it does feel more like you're a couple steps removed from big decision making. You're looked at maybe as a threat at times, or as like another team that could cause spin, or you're an outsider to a degree. You don't get pulled into the rounds of user research that just came in to help build on the thing that you just made. It's more like project based and you're out of there. So we're trying to find is the best of those two worlds, I guess, both for the benefits it could bring to our clients, but also to people, designers and strategists and engineers like us who have seen both sides and would miss pieces of both. We picked a hardcore lane. So yeah, like wanting to plug in as more of an extension of a team, definitely working hard to not create spin for other teammates that we're partnering with, like to really be there as an extension of what they're doing. And then on the I guess the agency pro side, what attracts people to agencies is usually in the realm of, I want the variety, I want the exciting challenges, and like I don't want to stay on one thing forever. I guess with us, that's an interesting dynamic where I think, yes, we would support any employee if they wanted to make a swap from an account that they've been on for a long time. But we also, I think, attract people because they can go deep on something. They don't have to be in for just a couple months. They could be on for years if they want and really get the same kind of experience that they might get on the client side, but be surrounded by other folks who are in the same situation and be inspired by, I guess, more than just one company's perspective. So yeah, very interested in find. That's a constant for us, is trying to find the balance between those two worlds.
I totally agree. And I mean, just from the right, I think what you're doing is you're bringing something needed to the complexity of the problems that companies are facing, right? That it actually requires a real depth of knowledge. And I want to come back to the experience side, because I think there was a fascinating point we were talking about the other day in terms of like the benefit to clients from having these established sort of and very deep and focused experiences with other clients, and so how it benefits your work and benefits all the future client work. But let's kind of dig in a little bit to some of the work that you do with these teams, which has been again, like as we've been sort of dancing around, really focused on creating systems that can then be applied not only to the product problem that's sort of facing now, but also those product problems that might come along in the future. So let's talk a little bit about the design systems work that you and the team do, and how if it's become a greater share of the work that you've done over the past few years. So talk to us about kind of your approach when it comes to design systems. I know Brandon, we'll maybe start with you on this one, and talk about maybe the philosophy and approach behind design systems that the team has been thinking about and evolving over the past year.
Sure. Yeah. And there's kind of 2 points in this. Maybe I'll leave one for Andy, kind of around just design systems and brand systems being kind of this really interesting point there. But just a little bit double clicking on design systems, sort of as we understand it, like a product design system. I guess the kind of the common way that we think about it. Obviously, just that world has evolved quite a bit, right, in the last half decade or so. And I think there's always been this sort of current thought that a design system is a design system is a design system, and we think about it like it started with a UI kit, and then it's a pattern library.
Right. Here's the Lego kit.
Exactly. Sticker sheets and this and that. And so I just think the world of really design systems that are designed for the company itself and the processes and the problems it faces, I think that's really where we found a lot of growth. In being able to kind of achieve that next level where we can actually understand, what are the efficiency and scale problems that you face, right? And they're very different, very, very different. Really, a platform company has a really less like a SaaS company, has a large offering of diversified features. They're going to need a different design system than maybe a e-commerce company, right? That has really one predominant experience, or a company that does white label products that they need to actually have like really locked down patterns that need to be themable, right? So like we see so many different things, and every single design system we build a little different. And I think that's just kind of where the maturity is increasing, I think, in that we're beginning to actually just do jobs to be done, right? And say like, we always come back to like efficiency and scale, like where design systems should make the design org more efficient. And everyone has a different choke point, or everyone has a different sort of pain point. So the way this can bear out is, for example, if, we want to empower a lot of UX innovation, like on a platform company, but we want to have a consistent visual style. We don't want people to really go off script with visual styles, but we do not want to encumber folks that want to create innovative experiences. We'd recommend, let's say, a very composable design system. And that's kind of like a bit of a moniker I think we a little bit have been introducing to the market in some ways, which is, a true bare middle kit of parts that does not have decorative aspects. What I mean by that is it has a kind of fixed number of components that are meant to do a particular interactive duty with clear guidance and documentation around when we use those components. And it comes with a perfect kind of one-to-one match between your design libraries and your development libraries. So, we say your variants in Figma match your props in React, right? So it's like, it's literally like a one-to-one declarative model, that's to say like you can build anything. And in fact, with composable design systems, we say a good way to tell if it's a good composable system is, can you make a bad product? You should be able to. It doesn't remove the need for design, right? Like a highly composable system does not make any, predetermination around what you're trying to do with the components. A total opposite side of the spectrum, a company where you're building experiences for client apps that need to be themed, we want to be actually quite locked down, right? We don't want to allow for bad UX. We want to say, here's our product, you can theme it, but we don't want to give you a lot of leeway. What we do want to give you a lot of leeway around is themability, visual styling. It's for different companies. We want you to inject your styling. That would be a much more templated, pattern-based design system, right? And they couldn't look any different. You know what I mean? There's such different animals, and so it's really like applying product thinking to design systems, which seems obvious.
But you're right. Like I think there was this perception that it's very plug and play, right? And I mean, I've talked to many design organizations over the years in my role at Adobe and thinking about their problems, and they all everyone would like a solution, but I think they start more so on the sort of like the nuts and bolts of it, the Lego kit of parts part of it, and less time thinking about their goals and their outcomes, right? Like, and you said, like it's a very product design problem. How do we design and engineer not just a set of visual assets, but a process that can help you achieve your goals and outcomes, right? And I think that you're right. Like there's a maturity aspect to that. Like we're all sort of thinking about and learning about this together, and that we are going to continue to evolve our perception and also our capabilities in solving these types of systematic problems, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I would say that it's evolved from design system as almost the thing you do after you get into UX. Like you rewind 5-6 years, maybe I could witness that happening where there was less value placed on systems thinking from very early stages as there is now, where literally there's not an engagement I can think of in recent history where the system of design wasn't there from day one as a consideration or as a key part of the work. So I think that's changed quite a bit. And also, design system is really where conversations like how does brand show up in product get surfaced. And we get brought in on a lot of those challenges where there was a recent rebrand. It was done by a traditional branding agency. It covers a lot of channels. It had a light touch view to what digital could be with this new branding. But when you have a digital product-centric organization, and that kind of a rebrand happens, it can be problematic. And so it's happened, more than a handful that I can think of with us, where that deck comes to us with the challenge of how do you now really take this all the way for product and make sure that product is a shining example of the brand, because it's where our customers show up with our brand the most.
Yep.
And one of the ways that I see systems thinking evolving, I guess, is that often when we go into the depths of how brand shows up in product, we end up changing some core aspects of what the brand language is. That then works its way back to the other channels outside of digital. So I think it would be far less common a few years ago for that to happen, where product influences core brand and not the other way around. It's turning into more of a two-way street there.
Yeah. I think you had a great statement there in talking about where the customers are interacting with the companies today, right? And the majority of those interactions, and increasingly so, as we've all seen over the past years, we've all been sort of isolated from the real world in different ways, is that more and more they're interacting through these digital channels, that the product, the service, even the digital marketing now is becoming a bigger share of the representative, of the brand itself. And so, I think, Andy, what you're saying is really fascinating to me, that design systems are really now the thing that people are interacting with and thing that are speaking for the brand, for the company. And that, it increasingly shows the importance of design systems and its impact on brand.
Yeah, it's it's dependent on the company to a degree, but definitely with some of our partners, product is the highest exposure for the brand. It's where customers, you take a Facebook or a Google, they're much more in the digital product experiencing what that brand is than they are seeing it in other marketing and advertising channels.
Yeah. Brandon, just to add on to that, do you have any specific examples of where the system has really influenced or impacted the brand, just to help make it a little more tangible for those who maybe haven't had some of those similar experiences?
Yeah, sure. I know this is a little bit secondhand, but I know, I've heard Andy kind of describe some of our work with eBay. We were brought in to kind of build their, what they call their playbook, which is their centralized tool for all kind of brand expressions, both digital and non-digital. And a great example there, and we've done this for other clients too, even not just the more I think about it, where we were actually tasked with building a tool to kind of make sense of their color system, the variations of which were much more built for different modalities, right? Be it print, maybe not digital, et cetera, et cetera. And in the process of kind of defining the rules and the systemization around how do we apply the color system really smartly across all these different form factors, we actually got into, what to kind of work best, especially in some of the major touch points, digital. We need to maybe refactor some of these things, right? We actually found ourselves in the process of kind of tweaking and enhancing those brand rules and applying them. And because we're coming at through the lens of systemization and tooling, which is how do we give people the answers to really challenging brand expression questions, such a natural place to evolve the brand. Right? You just see it all the time, right? It's impossible to get everything right in the sort of abstract when you're defining a brand, when you're not actually dealing with how it shows up in the touch point. So such a natural place for us to live because we're doing systematic tooling, such a natural place for us to say, it may make sense to kind of tweak the rules a bit. And we often, because we're building tools, we were able to kind of have that permission to do so. So, Andy,
go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
I was going to add, it's not only tweaking the rules for how you can use color for the brand in digital and other channels, but it was also reducing the number of values in the color palette, changing the colors within the palette so that there were more accessible pairings of two colors in the reduced palette. Things that you wouldn't necessarily think of if you're designing a brand system for traditional mediums. That's where a lot of the change comes from.
I love that you mentioned accessibility. I think that again, as a sort of key tenet going forward, the impact on brand is very tangible. Is if this thing, and I think there is a perception that because it's digital, it can sort of display anything that's, anything I can design, it's possible to be displayed digitally. And that's just going to work because, again, like I can export this image, or I can engineer this component, and because it's digital, that's exactly how it's going to look. And I think we're in this phase of designers now really wrestling with the medium, right? And I think we sort of take this for granted. And I'm going to throw this out there. I don't know if it's right or not, but I started thinking about, some of my early formative experiences in print, and how a knowledge of, again, like you can print anything, right? CMYK, you can just get out there. But understanding like those technologies could actually impacted how you then designed the icon or the typeface you chose, right? Because the application of it, like when it's finally printed, might actually be wrong, right? Because you're not thinking about mechanically like what's actually going on and how this is actually going to be printed. And I think there's something similar now that we're wrestling with, which is like, well, no, there are standards. There are ways in which this design, this component, needs to be accessible. And this is how technology like a browser handles things like accessibility. And the designers are now really wrestling with that. How does the medium of, like, say, particularly the browser being the majority share of what we're all designing for, how does the browser and then the user themselves actually have impact on the design, the system, and their interaction with the brand? I think that's a really fascinating sort of like thing that designers are now sort of dealing with,
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. In fact, I'd even add that you look at what's kind of happening in the tooling front, right? And I think there's a trend towards building more of those kind of constraints of the medium for which we're actually designing. We're not actually designing for canvas, right? We're actually designing for the web or for a phone or something. And so you're seeing the constraints of different layout, engines and things like that. That's getting us all closer to the medium for which we're actually designing, right? And so if you can, our head of UX engineering sort of loves that trend because, in his words, it's if it's possible in these kind of layout mechanisms, it's more likely to be possible, and it's more structured. It's a constraint-based layout system, right? And I think like that is essentially what you need to start to unpack all these things, like how do we make accessibility the default, and not if we have time, we'll do it.
Not this reactive, afterthought.
How do you do that? Like you have constraint-based systems. And so I completely agree that that's a really positive trend for everybody. And I think designers, especially, are excited to be getting closer to being able to understand what's possible and what can be built, as opposed to kind of the traditional paint a picture, give it to an engineer, and the engineer says, we can do this, but we can't do that. And again, it comes down to, the actual layout protocols that front engineers have always had to deal with, and anything is usually possible, right? But it's what's efficient and what makes sense and what allows us to do things like make accessibility to the phone. So totally agree.
Kind of picking up on that, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, but I was picking up on a couple things related to accessibility and kind of what you were just saying, Bren, which is like, in theory, like anything is possible, but like, what other things should be impacting, what designers are creating and how they're creating it? And thinking about accessibility in particular, which is, right, like, just because I can design this any way I want and I understand how it's implemented, right, doesn't necessarily mean it's accessible. And so what role does that play, and what responsibilities do designers have in thinking about things like accessibility, and even kind of going beyond that, things that are maybe a little more intangible, which is really about ethics, right? That we have a responsibility as designers to ensure that that we're accounting for the majority of people, whether they be abled or disabled, or whether they be, again, sort of accounting for, as much diversity as possible, right? That we're not just sort of tailoring our message and our design to sort of one particular audience and really challenging our own biases. And this was the thing that we all kind of talked about, in one of our previous discussions, like what roles and responsibilities do we have now, and what things should we be taking more seriously going forward when it comes to things like diversity, ethics, accountability, representation? Andy, you got anything there you want to start with? And come to mind?
Sure. I think that we as designers maybe are finding ourselves in more and more powerful positions to make big decisions through the years, as design kind of moves up the chain within orgs, becomes more of like even a C-suite kind of function, and a core way that companies approach their business. And I guess, where it's becoming more and more likely that our work can have impact on larger and larger audiences, especially, when we think about the kinds of orgs that we're plugged into that have billions of users experiencing the things that we try. So there's more pressure for us as our, involvement with those kind of companies expands. And, I think that the ethics side of the equation isn't like necessarily new to us, but it's as we work on bigger and bigger products with, where we can see how they really have more and more impact in our world and our society. It's something we're zooming in on as a company to become, really deeply knowledgeable in the realm of what kind of scenarios and stories are coming from our industry in the realm of, ethical dilemmas that a product designer was faced with, and how did they work through it, and what was the outcome? Like, I think we're paying attention more than ever to those stories, and we want to go digging for more and talk with experts. I mean, we're actually doing some of that now, and just leveling up the education, overall awareness for those factors for our team because of the position we find ourselves in. And yeah, accessibility is one facet of that for sure. But I guess, you want to make sure that you're designing towards your user needs. We put a lot of focus on understanding those deeply and prioritizing accordingly. And there's, being aware of what could potentially be kind of a dark pattern that is not in true service of the user, that's leading to some kind of negative impact either in their life or in the world at large. It's getting heavier as a designer. I think we could probably, sleep better at night if you rewind 10 years and we were the UI focused team who was, not so much on the line for major business strategy decisions, but we're getting closer and closer to the fire there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That we are taking on these new roles and we are seeing more as leaders. And yeah, I think our responsibility is growing. I know, Brent, how do you communicate that to the team? I mean, what are some things that, like, how have you talked about it, and how has the team responded to maybe some of these questions, particularly around, like the more tangible things like accessibility, but even like other things like diversity and representation?
Sure. I mean, I think one lens through which to look at it is, as we've been tasked, we've sort of had a more and more important seat at the table, right? Like Andy was saying, seen as more of a key input in some of these big decisions. So you have that happening where people are realizing the design process and the way of thinking is just an unbelievable way to solve problems. And so even companies that historically aren't very design driven are becoming more design driven. So we have that happening, but then also, and this is something kind of we very much try to sort of guard against, is as an industry, right, we're kind of becoming more specialized. So our goal is getting bigger, but a lot of our industry, and you see this in the courses, and you see this in our training, it's hyper specialized. So it's like I focus on interactive design, or I do these things that tend to, if you let that sort of color your thinking too much, I think the risk is you're only thinking about, that interaction, right?
Yeah.
You're not zooming out a little bit and saying how, what else is going on in this user's life, or what else is in the environment that there could be a consequence we're not thinking about. We're so sometimes as an industry zoomed in on the micro, right? That there's a risk there, that you're just not thinking holistically enough, right? You're not thinking enough about what else is happening. We're just so zoomed in. So what we try to do, I think, is, especially, as I mentioned in the beginning, product directors are kind of the strategy sort of home base, but we're all trying to be strategically grounded, is giving ourselves permission to not get so stuck in that, like the smallest level of detail of the interaction. I think that's where it's easy to convince yourself that, well, we're just working on this tiny thing. How much of an impact could it have? Why do I bear responsibility for anything, right? Like, I'm just doing the button, it's because we're allowing ourselves to get that specialized, right? And so I think like the key is in what Andy's saying. We're not claiming that we're master of this domain, but we're trying to build better practices. We're trying to find ways to kind of have permission to to not get so tripped up on one tool, one interaction, one framework, one user, just know one of anything, right?
Yeah.
How do we build more of that into our practice where we're not married to one framework? We're thinking more holistically so that we are doing a better job trying to imagine some of these unintended consequences. We are doing a better job realizing that we're completely missing a marginalized user group that we didn't even think of just because it's not the one primary one. It's all about like avoiding the ones, right? That just shows up in so many different ways. And, to Andy's point, I think with great power comes great responsibility. And I think the optimistic side of it, right? There's like, you can lose sleep at night easily, but I think the optimistic way of looking at it is given, the types of folks in the SoDA network, right? That all the agencies, all the clients we have, like we have a chance to be multipliers. If we bake that kind of thinking into our design practice, we have a chance to impact some of the biggest design orgs in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the exciting part of the equation. But yeah, for us, it's about trying to fight against that level of just so zoomed in that it feels like you're not really doing anything. You're just not looking at it. You're not looking at the bigger picture. So that's kind of what we're talking about on a day-to-day level with the team as it relates to ethics and again, making sure that we're not forgetting about key user groups, making sure that, we're not kind of perpetuating inequity and things like that.
Yeah. I love that. I really like what you're saying, like giving yourself permission to say that there's a bigger picture here. That the thing that you might be, the thing that might be being tracked from an analytics standpoint, that's not the end all be all of like what a designer can bring to the table, and that we're opening up and having these conversations and like giving ourselves permission to think about that, to say that our success isn't wholly founded upon this metric or this number, that we're really focused on representing the user to the fullest of our capabilities. And that we have the power to be able to drive those conversations. And I really love the two of you. Thank you for taking into that. It's been something that I've been thinking a lot about in our team and our organization as well. So I think that's a really great sort of like a more formal topic to kind of end on. And I'm looking forward to talking about that more with all of you and everyone out there in the community, in the coming months and years, because we're just getting started here. So it looks like I would love to take some questions from the audience. It looks like we have a few queued up here. So sure. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of toss these out there. And I think this is kind of open to both of you. So don't feel free to sort of jump in wherever you feel like you need to. Let's see. So the first one here is from Shivansh, who's in Delhi. I love that that's one of my favorite parts about live streaming is it's awesome. A global audience, right? So for someone who's maybe, coming up, and, we were just talking a little bit about specialization. Do you think you should be focusing on learning certain skills or having a real diversity of skills kind of at your disposal? Which one do you think that the designer should be thinking about or focusing on?
I think I'd answer this the same way that we sort of think about developing talent who's already on our team, which is it's good to pick a major. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like we have 3 disciplines. You can't exist in 2 of them. You need to pick your lane and really become a part of that discipline, which is really focused as a team in developing our craft in, say, the realm of product design or strategy and management. Each one of those has, a discipline lead, and we're constantly trying to improve the way we're working and getting deeper into our craft and our specialization. But at the same time, we're very focused on creating ways for those teams to create a shared language with each other, and to not be siloed. So we want to create the focus and space for those disciplines to get together and advance and specialize, but not lose sight of a big part of every one of those disciplines' job is to be able to talk really well with the other 2. And that's what leads to, really a seamless product team. So it's really important that you don't you don't put your blinders on, that you get really good at a thing, but know how to speak the language of your peer teams.
Yeah. Great answer. So the next one I think is related to that, which is, and you touched on this a little bit about team development, but what are you looking for? This is from Munir, from Turkey. What are you looking for when you're hiring a designer, right? So you have a process and a model as an agency. What are you looking for when you're hiring new talent? Maybe Bren can tackle this one a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think it's again similar to what Andy's saying. I think we're looking for a breadth of experience on cross digital products, UX. Really, especially interested in just how you approach UX design, what your thought process is. Being able to, I think, really effectively do those early stages, right? Like we don't necessarily think of any one thing as being, we don't have UX researchers, right? Like we don't, our design folks are very schooled up in the end-to-end design process. So it's a lot of it is certainly approach to UX and problem solving. And then obviously, the craft comes into play. We're looking for experience. We'd love to see a range of different form factors, modalities, different types of tools. Love to see different, industries. I think like the diversity piece is key. Without, again, I want to underscore Andy's point, which is like, it's good if you've kind of built up some superpowers, and there's a thread. I think if you can tell that story of like what you've really built craft wise, but you have enough of that diversity that, we're looking for someone that can plug into lots of different challenges, and those challenges are going to change. And then I think that's the point Andy's making is being, if you're good at one thing, but you're able and you're fluent and you're learning others, very transferable skills. You're going to be able to sort of morph and shift and find those new, you're going to build your craft and expand what you can do in your skills and your passion by not having those blinders on and saying, I just do one thing. So at least, when and Andy can probably talk a little bit more about really the discipline itself. But
I just wanted to add one point that just kind of speaks to all three quickly, which is when we're looking at new candidates, the number one signal we're looking for is ambition. And that comes in a lot of forms, but it's something, that we value super highly, like to see. I could see it take shape in, right out of school, like performing well, going for the internship, like quickly, getting into career chapter 1, and then, advancing in that role. And, on the side of looking at a portfolio, it's putting in the work to make a really clear story, taking the time to not just put, surface level design up there, but to explain how you got to the final answers and why they were good. Oftentimes we see those, portfolios that are dominated by visual design, and that's not really a great fit for us. We need to see a signal that people are trying to get beyond that direct design craft, and they have an ambition for the whole product and systems world.
Yeah. And I also added curiosity, and I think that was sort of implied. I think in what you're saying is I myself am always looking for those people who are ambitious but are also curious, and to know that like there are things that they don't know, and always interested in improving their own skills and their own processes. That's really great. So we're quickly running out of time. I'm so sorry. If you asked a question and we couldn't get to it, so like I could just talk with these guys all day long. So we maybe got deep on a few things, but again, this is what these conversations are for: is to really get in the weeds and really get some of your own thinking kind of out there into the world. So I really appreciate it. So there's no better way I like to spend my day than talking with talented and creative people like yourselves, Andy and Bren. Thank you so much. We're gonna bring Tom back on here in a second to kind of wrap things up. Tom, thanks for setting the stage. And Kristen, great to see you.
Hi.
As always, thanks for staying
Thank you all.
for having these great conversations. I hope everybody got something out of it.
Oh,
yeah. Go ahead, Kristen. Sorry.
I was just saying, I love it. I love the authenticity that all of you bring to the conversation. And I definitely saw that represented in the chat. So thank you guys so much. It was wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Big thanks to Andy and Bren. I really appreciated how kind of thoughtfully and just honestly with yourselves and the teams you're wrestling with things like design ethics and responsibility, and also, but the practicality and value of brand design systems, how they really can be used, what they really can solve, what they really can't solve. It gets very easy to get caught up in a trend and imagine that it's, the solution to everything. So thanks for being with us today and just sharing your perspective and sharing even the questions you guys are struggling with. And then big thanks, Talon. Always a great conversation today. We really appreciate you moderating and facilitating these. So thank you, gentlemen.
My pleasure.
Thank you to everyone who joined us. Thanks for the questions. And we hope that we will see you next month on July 22nd, when we have a conversation with Philip Tiongson, who's the founder and CEO of Potion out of New York City. So we hope you can join us for that conversation as well. Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brent.